Friends, welcome at the Summary Club. Today we will briefly talk about all modern scientific astrology, the arts of prediction, and in general about at least the theoretical possibility to predict future events in the lives of individuals, society, and even the entire planet. Can astrological events and different planetary locations, at least in theory, influence our lives, destiny, and even our personal and love relationships? Or is this all a big myth that has been lingering since time immemorial? Indeed, people at all times have wanted to know their future, and ideally even know how to predict unhappy moments to avoid them, and of course have the opportunity, for example from the first time, to find a good job, and the more suitable person for personal relationships, and not to experiment a huge number of times, constantly getting unnecessary bumps. And yes, even if today a minority of people probably believe in astrology, but when something really inexplicable happens in their life, or ordinary situations are repeated over and over again, as if bewitched, at this point even people who do not believe in the art of prediction and astrology begin to guess at something, look for some psychological problems, or even stranger, turn to all kinds of magicians and healers, or even to blame some mythical curses. And here a question arises: why do we act like this? Because allegedly in our age of progress it has long been scientifically proven that astrology isn't a science or even art, but rather an outdated superstition. Although automatically there is another question: why sometimes there are unusual and sometimes completely inexplicable relationships between people, which are inexplicable neither from the point of view of psychology, nor from the point of view of modern science? Why is it that sometimes people who seem destined to be together suddenly break up? Moreover, with great scandals, and sometimes fights, negativity, up to and including criminal offenses. What to say? According to statistics, over 70% of divorcing couples believe that they do not agree in character, and can no longer tolerate each other, although just a couple of weeks ago, when their mutual feelings were stronger, they did not notice even the slightest discomfort. Think for yourself: if we were just two sets of chromosomes and chemical elements from the Mendeleev table, then where do some incomprehensible moments appear that cause mutual attraction, love, or, on the contrary, little explained repulsive feelings, indifference, and even aggressive mutual conflicts? In fact, to explain this paradox, a long time ago was invented such a sphere of activity as astrology, with the help of which it was possible to explain some previously inexplicable in any other way moments of human relationships. And then people who study astrology came to the conclusion that through a deeper knowledge of astrology and theory you can get answers to almost all other questions of interest, from the list of bad harvest years, for which it is better to be prepared in advance, up to the prediction of the dates of world wars, financial crises, and natural disasters. Many people even today claim that even with a basic understanding of astrology, it is possible to understand and explain why two seemingly conflict-free people, who have never had any major disagreements with anyone before, sometimes come together. But for some reason suddenly, being together, they begin to quarrel, argue, and sometimes just itching to explain their position to one another, or at least to yell a little and beat the dishes. Why does this happen? What can influence these two people? Why with all other people they behave normally, but when they meet together they form just an explosive rattlesnake mixture? Astrology on this subject says quite concretely that supposedly there is some irresistible for an ordinary person force that affects the behavior of people, and even animals, and in general on all liquids and even solid bodies on the earth. Yes, of course, we, who have learned by bitter experience with all sorts of charlatans and fortune-tellers, almost all at once begin to cry that any prediction in astrology is not an exact science, and in general not a science at all, but a medieval nonsense, heresy and superstition. But let's stop for a second and stop making yet another unfounded conclusion. Yes, Of course, astrology as it exists today, and especially considering the more than modest knowledge of most modern astrologers, will probably not do you any good in practice. But with all these disadvantages of astrology as a modern science, today it's still absolutely and scientifically proven that it is the gravitational force of the moon that affects all the tides on the planet Earth. It's also absolutely proven and unquestionable that various kinds of flares or increased solar activity can also strongly affect the well-being of people, and in some cases even the performance of electronics. It has long been officially recognized by the state and medicine, and it's not even a secret that now many print media and the internet along with the weather forecast issue approximate forecasts and solar activity, so people, especially the elderly, could somehow prepare and for example stock up on medicines for that day. Although the influence of solar activity is felt even by young people, and most likely even by everyone, just not everyone notices it, and even knows about it. And by the way, perhaps it is because they are afraid of and do not trust some mythical astrology since childhood. But, again, today it's definitely known that the solar activity and location of other planets, one way or another, affects our condition and mood. Moreover, for example, we can notice that girls' menstrual cycles coincide with the period of the moon rotation, but not with the calendar month, as many people think. And then there is a logical question: if the moon has no effect on a person, then why the human body is perfectly adjusted exactly to this cycle, and this applies not just to one girl on Earth, but to everyone. Well, okay, in the world there are actually many different mysteries associated with astrology. For example, scientists and modern statistics also claim that the month or at least the time of year in which a person was born, uniquely affects even his growth and even more so on some specific diseases, which people born in different seasons suffer from. For example, people born in winter or early spring are statistically about 10% more likely to suffer from nervous disorders and even schizophrenia. And there is absolutely no magic here, just the usual statistics, which in principle can also be explained by various natural factors and climate. For example, women in winter get less vitamins from food, as fresh fruit almost doesn't grow at this time, and of course, they also go out in the fresh air less often, as a result of which children may have brittle bones and other hardly noticeable violations, which over time can still affect the health, character and even physique of the adult. Moreover, the same statistics prove that people born in winter live a little longer on average than others. There are more long livers among them. And those born in spring are usually slightly higher than their peers, although they may suffer from allergies or asthma more often. This is how knowledge of even trivial natural processes can already have a strong influence on a person. But it really turns out that even the growth of a man, at least a little, but still depends in a percentage ratio on the time of the year in which he was born. Well, and earlier, as we know, the wise men of the East always planned strictly by astronomical dates, especially the birth of emperors and great sages.
Subscribe to the Summary Club and watch short versions of the most popular and useful videos every day.
And by the way, in fact, according to the legend, even the birth of Jesus Christ was predicted by astrologers, and with great and even incredible accuracy. Whether this more complex astrological science is necessary for the whole world as it exists today is of course more than debatable, but hopefully no one will argue with the fact that the time of birth and a certain astrological location of planets still somehow influence the character of a person, even if this influence isn't always consistent with astrological books, but this influence and tendency can be clearly seen. I think it's already clear to everyone, even from the available scientific statistics, that people born under the zodiac sign of Twins, indeed, are usually more communicative and work in television more often than representatives of other, so-called, zodiac signs. Well, among managers we will often find an active person Leo, or, as an opposite, among serial maniacs, we will often see outwardly silent Virgo, if we look through the crime reports. And certainly no one will argue that a business partner, born under the sign of the Libra, will always be doubted more often and longer than others. But with Aries to agree will be almost impossible, because he, as people say, stubborn horns, and thus often will last to insist on his decision, absolutely rejecting even the logical arguments of his opponent. These patterns, it is hard to say, because sometimes some people really inexplicably react and behave exactly as written in the books on astrology. But others, on the contrary, seem to be almost completely inconsistent with the knowledge from astrological books. Naturally, even to all these more complicated questions, modern scientific astrology has its answer, or thinks so, but, unequivocally, they have to improve in this kind of half-esoteric and half-scientific knowledge for a very long time, and today most famous astrologers really have too limited knowledge in this matter, otherwise they would have changed this world for the better long ago. But let us also be honest, because it's also well known, once the Egyptians could predict solar and lunar eclipses for years ahead even without telescopes, and largely on this kept their power. Also the Mayans made their fairly accurate calendars for hundreds of years ahead, sitting deep in the jungle, and the sailors often traveled thousands of miles on water, being at sea for months and navigating exclusively by the stars. And this is not to mention other even more amazing cases occurring more than once in the history of astrology. Some such cases, by the way, are almost truly scientific applications of astrology, we have already told about in the material about science, astrology and magic. But still this is an old and already, in our time, almost lost astrology with its unproven effectiveness. But the new modern, we can say, scientific astrological science with its super efficient computers, artificial intelligence and huge databases of statistical data is only created by various enthusiasts and modern researchers. And that is why today astrology isn't so useful and is considered quackery, but not because it's not workable, but rather because the knowledge of the old school of astrology is lost or too complex for modern man. But modern astrology and statistical science are not yet the most accurate types of science in existence, and they do not yet allow predictions based on real statistics that would explain and predict ahead of time all the major processes going on in the world. But progress is being made, and we see that today there is a lot of movement in this direction, including due to the improvement of computer technology. And today's scientists can already predict with a high probability not only the weather, but even the percent of the probability of behavior of demonstrators during the next popular unrest, which is often recently used by the intelligence services of the advanced countries of the world. And in general, progressive and wise people often use even the smallest possible advantage, even if it's not yet completely perfected. And modern scientific astrology, the art of prediction, statistics, computer modeling, and similar industries, even in their current state, can provide this advantage. Moreover, today's scientific astrology is no longer based on mythical symbols and indecipherable incantations of great magicians and astrologers, but rather on statistical patterns and the dependence of human behavior, relative to certain time periods and their corresponding certain locations of planets. And also, various patterns of chronological dates in history are often used, even without reference to specific people, are often used, even without, well, how these data and patterns can be used is another question. But if you learn how to use them competently and for your own purposes, even today you can get very interesting, useful, and most importantly working information. Therefore, for practical uses of the new modern statistical astrology, see our next stories and videos, such as the already finally scientific compatibility of the zodiac signs and the so-called love horoscopes, which actually often work. All important links will be, as always, in the first comment on YouTube. There you can also post questions, additions and what you want to see next time. We'll answer everything. Good luck to everyone. We'll answer everything.
And friend, don't forget to subscribe to the Summary Club for becoming more successful, educated, kinder and wiser every day. Save hundreds of hours and dollars spending on boring regular education. Feel free to write your opinions and questions about each video. We read all the comments. In addition, go to our official website, where you can find reading materials or watch other videos on channel and links in the description. All the best.